You wake up and the weight is already there. Before you even open your eyes, the anxiety starts whispering. Before you move, the laziness wraps around you like chains. Another day of fighting yourself. Another day of wanting to do everything and doing nothing. Another day trapped between the fear of what might happen and the paralysis of not moving forward. But what if I told you that Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, battled these same demons, and that he discovered 7 lessons that can set you completely free? Anxiety and laziness. They seem like opposites, don't they? One is your mind racing uncontrollably into the future, catastrophizing everything that could go wrong. The other is your body refusing to move, stuck in the present moment like concrete. But here's what most people never realize. They're not opposites. They're partners. 2 sides of the same coin. And that coin is fear. Your anxiety whispers that everything matters too much, that the stakes are too high, that you can't afford to fail. So your laziness responds by making you not try at all. If you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't move, nothing can go wrong. Your mind races while your body freezes, and you're caught in between, exhausted by the internal war that never ends. Marcus Aurelius understood this trap intimately. As emperor of Rome, he had every reason to be paralyzed by anxiety. Millions of lives depended on his decisions. One wrong move could collapse an empire. The pressure was unimaginable, and yet he also faced the same human tendency toward avoidance, toward procrastination, toward choosing the easy comfort of doing nothing over the difficult work of doing what mattered. In the next 60 to 80 minutes, you're going to learn the 7 lessons that freed Marcus from this prison. Not theories, not abstract philosophy. Practical, battle-tested wisdom that worked for a man whose responsibilities were greater than yours or mine will ever be. If these lessons could help him find peace and productivity while running an empire, they can help you break free from the anxiety and laziness that are stealing your life. These lessons will challenge everything you believe about why you feel anxious and why you procrastinate. They will show you that the solution isn't to fight harder against these forces, but to understand them so deeply that they lose their power over you. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see anxiety and laziness not as your enemies, but as messengers pointing you toward a completely different way of being. Before we dive into this transformation together, if this message resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this with someone who's fighting the same battle. Your comments help me understand how to serve you better. Now let's begin. There's a particular exhaustion that comes from living with chronic anxiety and laziness. It's not the tiredness of having done too much. It's the bone-deep weariness of having fought yourself all day, every day for weeks or months or years. You're tired, but you've barely moved. You're stressed, but you've barely accomplished anything. The day ends and you feel both overwhelmed and unproductive, both burned out and guilty for not having tried hard enough. You know this exhaustion. You wake up already tired from the dreams where your mind was still racing through worst-case scenarios. You open your eyes and immediately the mental list begins. Everything you should do, everything you need to do, everything that will go wrong if you don't do it. The list grows so overwhelming that you can't even figure out where to start, so you don't start. You reach for your phone instead. You scroll. You distract. You numb. And with each minute that passes, the guilt builds. The voice in your head gets louder. You're wasting your life. You're lazy. You're failing. Why can't you just do the things? But here's what that voice doesn't understand. You're not lazy. Laziness isn't your problem. Fear is your problem. You're not avoiding action because you don't care. You're avoiding action because you care too much. Every task feels loaded with meaning. Every decision feels permanent. Every potential mistake feels catastrophic. So your nervous system does what it was designed to do when facing overwhelming threat. It freezes. It shuts down. It conserves energy. What looks like laziness to the outside world is actually a sophisticated survival response to perceived danger. And the anxiety? That's not coming from nowhere either. Your anxiety is your mind's attempt to protect you by anticipating every possible threat. It thinks that if it can imagine every bad outcome, if it can prepare for every disaster, If it can stay vigilant every moment, then maybe, just maybe, it can keep you safe. Your anxiety believes it's helping you. It believes it's the only thing standing between you and catastrophe. Marcus Aurelius knew both of these experiences intimately. He wrote in his private journal, never intending anyone to read it, about mornings when he didn't want to get out of bed, about the heaviness of responsibility, about the overwhelming nature of the tasks before him. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?" Notice what he's doing here. He's not denying the resistance. He's not pretending it's easy. He's acknowledging the difficulty and then connecting it to something larger than his momentary feelings. He's reminding himself of purpose, not to guilt himself into action, but to contextualize the discomfort. The resistance is real, but it's not the whole truth. The first lesson Marcus teaches us is this: anxiety and laziness are not character flaws. They are symptoms of misaligned perception. When you see the world, your tasks, your life through a distorted lens, anxiety and laziness are the natural result. Change the lens and the symptoms transform. What does this mean practically? It means that trying to fight anxiety with willpower alone is like trying to fight a shadow. You can swing at it all day, but you're not addressing the real issue. The shadow exists because there's an object blocking light. Deal with the object and the shadow disappears. Your anxiety exists because there's a perception blocking clarity. Deal with the perception, and the anxiety transforms. Marcus wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that again slowly. The pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Your anxiety isn't caused by your circumstances, your responsibilities, your challenges. It's caused by your interpretation of those things. And interpretation is something you can change. Think about a time when you were anxious about something and then you got more information and the anxiety disappeared. The situation didn't change. Your understanding of it changed. The anxiety was never about the situation. It was about your story about the situation. This is crucial to understand because it means you have far more power than you think. You can't always change your circumstances, but you can always examine and potentially shift your interpretation of them. The second lesson is about the root of laziness. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It's an emotional regulation problem. You don't procrastinate because you're bad at managing your time. You procrastinate because you're trying to avoid uncomfortable emotions. The task you're avoiding isn't really about the task. It's about the feelings the task brings up. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being perfect, fear of discovering you're not as capable as you hoped, fear of success and the new responsibilities it brings. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop treating procrastination as a moral failing that proves you're lazy. You start treating it as information about what scares you. And when you know what scares you, you can address it directly instead of trying to bully yourself into action. Marcus faced this constantly. As emperor, he could have easily filled his days with pleasant distractions and avoided the hard decisions. He had access to every entertainment, every luxury, every escape the ancient world could offer. But he understood that avoiding difficult emotions through distraction only made them stronger. He wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." He's saying, the anxiety about future tasks is worse than the tasks themselves. The anticipation of discomfort is more painful than the discomfort. So stop feeding the anticipation. Meet each moment as it comes with reason, with presence, with the understanding that you've handled difficult things before, and you'll handle them again. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of how anxiety and laziness work together to trap you. Understanding this pattern is essential to breaking free from it. Your brain has an ancient threat detection system that was designed for a world very different from the one you live in now. When your ancestors faced a physical threat, a predator or a rival tribe, Their nervous system had three options: fight, flight, or freeze. These responses were perfect for immediate physical dangers. But your modern life doesn't present many immediate physical threats. Instead, you face psychological threats, social evaluation, financial pressure, existential uncertainty, complex decisions with unclear outcomes. And here's the problem. Your ancient nervous system doesn't distinguish between types of threats. It responds to a difficult conversation the same way it would respond to a lion. It floods you with stress hormones. It narrows your focus. It prepares you for immediate action. Except there's no immediate action to take. You can't run from a difficult email. You can't fight your way out of a complex project. So all that activation, all that stress energy, has nowhere to go. It circulates in your system, creating the sensation you call anxiety. Your body is revved up with nowhere to go, like a car with the gas pedal pressed to the floor while in park. The engine screams, but you don't move forward. That's anxiety. And then the freeze response kicks in. When fight and flight aren't options, when the threat feels too big or too overwhelming or too ambiguous, your nervous system chooses freeze. In nature, some animals freeze when caught by predators, becoming still in hopes the predator will lose interest. Your system does something similar with overwhelming responsibilities. It shuts down. It becomes lethargic. It disconnects from motivation. What you experience as laziness or procrastination is often this freeze response in disguise. Marcus Aurelius, though he lived 2,000 years before modern neuroscience, understood this pattern through careful self-observation. He recognized that his mind would create elaborate catastrophes about the future, and his body would respond as if those imagined catastrophes were happening now. He wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." This is the third lesson. Most of your anxiety exists only in imagination. The future you're anxious about hasn't happened. It may never happen. And even if something difficult does happen, it probably won't be as catastrophic as your imagination is painting it. Your mind is showing you the worst possible outcomes on repeat, and you're believing that movie is reality. But it's not reality. It's one possible interpretation of reality, usually the most dramatic and least likely one. Think of your mind as a highly sophisticated prediction machine. Its job is to anticipate what's coming, so you can prepare. In a stable, predictable environment, this works beautifully. But in an uncertain environment with lots of variables and unknowns, the prediction machine goes haywire. It starts generating hundreds of possible scenarios, many of them terrible, just to make sure you're prepared for everything. The problem is this process itself becomes the threat. You're not anxious about what's actually happening. You're anxious about the stories your mind is generating about what might happen. Here's a metaphor Marcus would appreciate. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a river and you need to cross it. Your anxiety is like standing on the shore, imagining all the ways you could drown. You picture the current pulling you under. You imagine your strength failing halfway across. You envision slipping on the rocks. You create detailed scenarios of disaster. And as you stand there imagining, you become more and more convinced that crossing is impossible or deadly. Meanwhile, the actual river might be shallow enough to wade across easily. But you'll never know because you're trapped in imagination. Laziness or procrastination in this metaphor is refusing to even approach the river. You tell yourself you'll cross it later. You find other things to do. You convince yourself the other side isn't that important anyway. But the need to cross doesn't go away. It stays in the back of your mind, creating a constant low-level stress. You're not at peace on this shore because you know you're supposed to be on the other shore. And you're not making progress toward the other shore because you're too afraid to step into the water. The fourth lesson is about presence. Anxiety lives in the future. Laziness lives in avoidance of the present. Peace lives in full engagement with what's actually in front of you right now. When you bring your full attention to this present moment, not to your thoughts about the future or your resistance to action, but to the actual sensory reality of now, something remarkable happens. The anxiety quiets. The resistance softens. There's just this moment, and in this moment, you're okay. Marcus practiced this constantly. He would remind himself on concentrate every minute like a Roman, like a man, on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. Notice the instruction. Concentrate on what's in front of you, not what might be in front of you tomorrow, not what you wish was in front of you, what's actually here now. This isn't about denying the future or refusing to plan. It's about recognizing that you can only act in the present moment. All your power exists here now. When your mind is in the future, worrying about what might happen, you have no power there. You can't change the future by worrying about it. You can only change the future by acting skillfully in the present. And you can't act skillfully in the present if your attention is scattered across 100 imagined futures. The fifth lesson builds on this. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about training your attention to stay with what matters. The word discipline comes from the same root as disciple, meaning learner or follower. Discipline is about following a chosen path, not about self-punishment. But somewhere along the way, we confused discipline with harshness, with forcing, with overriding your own needs and feelings. Marcus had a different understanding. He saw discipline as the practice of repeatedly bringing his attention back to what was important, to what was within his control, to what aligned with his values. When his mind wandered into anxiety, he would notice and bring it back. When his motivation dipped, he would acknowledge it and reconnect with purpose. He wasn't bullying himself. He was gently, persistently redirecting himself. Think of training a puppy. If the puppy wanders off, you don't beat it. You calmly bring it back to where it should be. Again and again, patiently. Your attention is like that puppy. It will wander into anxiety. It will wander into procrastination. That's not failure. That's just what attention does. The practice is noticing when it's wandered and gently bringing it back. Not with judgment, not with harshness, but with patient persistence. Now we arrive at the practical core of transformation. Understanding anxiety and laziness is valuable, but understanding alone doesn't free you. You need practices that rewire how you relate to these experiences. You need tools that work in the moment when anxiety is screaming and motivation is gone. The sixth lesson is about the power of micro-commitments. You don't need to solve your entire life right now. You just need to take the next smallest possible step. This is where most people get stuck. They look at the mountain of what needs to be done, and it's so overwhelming that they can't even take the first step. Or they take a first step and then immediately project out all the steps that will come after it, and the projected enormity paralyzes them again. Marcus understood this trap. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But what does this mean practically when you're paralyzed by overwhelm? It means narrowing your focus to an almost absurdly small scope. Not "I need to write this entire report," but "I need to open the document." Not "I need to get my life together," but "I need to make the bed." This isn't about lowering standards. It's about understanding how motivation actually works. Motivation doesn't precede action. Action precedes motivation. You don't feel motivated and then do the thing. You do a tiny bit of the thing, and that creates a little bit of momentum, which generates a little bit of motivation, which makes the next tiny bit easier. But you have to start without motivation. You have to be willing to take the first tiny step, even when every part of you is screaming to stay still. Here's a practice you can implement immediately. When you're facing a task that triggers your anxiety procrastination cycle, ask yourself, what's the smallest possible action I could take related to this? Not the first step. The smallest. If the task is writing an email, the smallest action isn't writing it. It's opening your email program. That's it. Just open it. You don't have to write anything. Just open it. What you'll often find is that once you've taken that micro step, the next micro step becomes possible. Once the email program is open, maybe you write the greeting. Just hello, name, and nothing more. And then maybe you write one sentence. Each micro step reduces the resistance to the next micro step. Before you realize it, you've built momentum, and what seemed impossible 20 minutes ago is now done. But what about when the anxiety is so strong that you can't even take the micro step? What about when your nervous system is so activated that even the smallest action feels impossible? This is where the next practice becomes essential. Learn to regulate your nervous system before trying to force action. Your anxiety isn't just mental, it's physiological. Your body is in a state of high alert, and you can't think your way out of a physiological state. You have to shift it physiologically first. Marcus didn't have the language of nervous system regulation, but he understood the principle. He wrote about taking walks, about cold water, about physical practices that shifted his state. Here's what you can do right now. When anxiety is high and you're frozen, don't fight it directly. First, signal to your body that you're safe. The simplest way, breathing. Not just any breathing, but extended exhale breathing. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 6 or 8. The extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, literally telling your body that there's no immediate threat. If there were a threat, you wouldn't have time to breathe slowly. So slow breathing signals safety. Do this for just 3 to 5 breath cycles. You'll notice the grip of anxiety loosening slightly. Not disappearing completely, but loosening. That slight loosening is enough to take your first micro step. Then you alternate. Micro step, regulate. Micro step, regulate. You're not trying to eliminate anxiety before you act. You're learning to act with anxiety present, but regulate it enough that it doesn't paralyze you. The 7th lesson is the culmination of everything. You eliminate anxiety and laziness not by fighting them, but by replacing the underlying beliefs that generate them. This is the deepest work. All the practices above are valuable, but they're treating symptoms. To address the root, you have to examine the beliefs you hold about yourself, about life, about what it means to succeed or fail. What beliefs are generating your anxiety? Often beliefs like, I have to be perfect or I'm worthless. If I fail at this, it means I'm a failure. Other people's judgments determine my value. I should be further along than I am. I can't handle discomfort. These beliefs, usually unconscious, create the lens through which you interpret everything. And through that lens, everything becomes threatening. What beliefs are generating your procrastination? Often beliefs like, if I don't try, I can't fail. Rest is only deserved after productivity. My worth is determined by my output. I should want to do this, so there's something wrong with me that I don't. Again, these beliefs create the emotional landscape that makes action feel unbearable. Marcus spent his life examining and challenging his beliefs. He would write them down explicitly and then question them. Is this belief true? How do I know it's true? What would be true if this belief wasn't true? What belief would serve me better? This isn't positive thinking or affirmations. This is genuine philosophical inquiry into the assumptions you're living by. Here's a practice for you. Take the task you're most procrastinating on, or the thing that generates the most anxiety. Write down, this makes me anxious or resistant because I believe, and then complete that sentence honestly. Write down every belief that comes up, no matter how irrational it seems. Then for each belief, ask, is this absolutely true? Can I know for certain this is true? What evidence contradicts this belief? What would change if I didn't believe this? Often you'll discover that the beliefs generating your anxiety and procrastination are either not true, not always true, or not as true as you assumed. And that discovery itself begins to weaken their grip on you. You start to see that you've been operating from assumptions rather than reality. And assumptions can be questioned. Reality can't be argued with, but assumptions can. Marcus wrote something profound about this process. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Even your own thoughts about yourself, your capabilities, your worth, these are opinions you've developed, not objective truths. And if they're opinions, they can change. You can develop new opinions based on better evidence and wiser perspective. Now we enter the teachings that Marcus kept in the most private corners of his meditations. These are the practices he returned to in his darkest moments. when the anxiety was overwhelming and the weight of responsibility made him want to hide from the world. These lessons are less known but incredibly powerful. Marcus understood something that modern psychology is only recently confirming. Your relationship with discomfort determines the quality of your life, not your ability to avoid discomfort, but your ability to be with it, to move through it, to not be controlled by it. He wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path, then go around. That's all you need to know." But what about when the discomfort can't be thrown out or gone around? What about when it's inherent in what you're trying to do? Then, Marcus would say, you must change your relationship with it. You must stop seeing discomfort as the enemy and start seeing it as the indicator that you're growing, that you're stretching beyond your current capacity, that you're becoming more than you were. Think about physical exercise. The burn in your muscles during a workout is uncomfortable. But you've learned not to interpret that burn as danger. You've learned to interpret it as growth. The discomfort means the workout is working. What if you could relate to psychological and emotional discomfort the same way? The anxiety you feel when facing something challenging isn't a sign you shouldn't do it. It's a sign that it matters to you, that it's pushing your edges, that growth is possible here. Marcus had a practice for this. When he felt resistance to something he needed to do, he would lean into the resistance with curiosity. He would ask, "What is this resistance protecting me from? What am I afraid will happen if I do this thing? What part of me feels threatened?" And often he would discover that the resistance was trying to protect him from something that wasn't actually dangerous. It was trying to protect his ego from potential bruising, or his self-image from potential contradiction, or his comfort from potential disruption. And once he saw what the resistance was actually protecting, he could choose whether that protection was necessary. You can practice this. The next time you feel strong resistance to doing something you know you should do, pause. Don't immediately try to override the resistance. Instead, have a conversation with it. Literally ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" And listen. An answer will come, maybe not in words, but in a feeling or an image or a knowing. And once you understand what the resistance is protecting you from, you can address that concern directly. Often, just acknowledging the fear is enough to reduce the resistance. Marcus also understood the power of premeditation of adversity. This is a Stoic practice that sounds counterintuitive, deliberately imagining the worst that could happen. This isn't catastrophizing. It's controlled exposure to your fears. You imagine the feared outcome clearly, and then you imagine yourself handling it. You see yourself surviving it, learning from it, continuing on. This practice inoculates you against the fear. The thing you're anxious about loses some of its power when you've mentally rehearsed handling it. Here's how to practice it. Take something you're anxious about, maybe a presentation you have to give, or a difficult conversation you need to have, or a project you need to start. Close your eyes and imagine it going badly, really badly. Imagine the worst realistic outcome. Not fantastical disaster, but the worst that could actually reasonably happen. Sit with that image. Feel the discomfort of it. And then imagine, what would I do next? How would I handle it? What would I learn? How would I recover? What you'll often discover is that even the worst realistic outcome is survivable. Uncomfortable, yes. Disappointing, maybe. But survivable. And when you know you can survive even the worst outcome, the fear of that outcome loses its paralyzing power. You can act despite the fear because you know the worst case won't destroy you. Marcus also practiced what we might call negative visualization about his own tendencies. He would imagine himself giving in to laziness. Imagine a day wasted in distraction and avoidance. Imagine the regret he would feel at the end of that day. And that imagined regret would motivate him to choose differently in the present moment. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This sounds pessimistic, but it's not. It's preparation. He's not hoping for these things. He's preparing himself mentally so that when they happen, he's not thrown off balance. You can use this practice for yourself. Imagine the version of you that gives in to anxiety and procrastination today. Really see that person. See them wasting the day, avoiding what matters, choosing comfort over growth. See how they feel at the end of the day. That image of future regret can be surprisingly motivating in the present moment. Not as a tool for shame, but as a tool for clarity about what you actually want. Another hidden practice from Marcus. He would regularly remind himself of his own mortality. You could leave life right now, he would write. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This wasn't morbid. It was clarifying. When you remember that your time is limited, that this day is not guaranteed to repeat, the question, what really matters, becomes much easier to answer. And the things that generate anxiety often reveal themselves as less important than you thought. The judgment of others, trivial compared to the shortness of life. The perfect execution of a task, less important than the attempt itself when you remember you won't have infinite chances to try. Practice this carefully, because it can tip into either nihilism or anxiety if done wrong. But done right, it's incredibly freeing. Once a week, maybe Sunday evening, spend 5 minutes contemplating the fact that you will die, that everyone you love will die, that this life is temporary. Not to depress yourself, but to recalibrate your priorities. What matters in light of mortality? Usually not the things you're anxious about. Usually not the things you're procrastinating on because they feel too hard. What matters is connection, growth, contribution, presence, courage. When you're connected to your mortality in a healthy way, anxiety about small things diminishes, and motivation for meaningful things increases. Marcus also practiced gratitude as an antidote to both anxiety and laziness. He would deliberately notice what was going well, what he had, what was working, not to bypass difficulties but to maintain perspective. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." This wasn't naive positivity. This was a man who had lost most of his children, who faced constant betrayal, who dealt with plague and war. He chose gratitude deliberately as a counterweight to the darkness. Anxiety focuses your attention on everything that's wrong or could go wrong. Laziness focuses your attention on how hard things are and how much easier it would be to do nothing. Gratitude interrupts both patterns by deliberately focusing your attention on what's right, what's working, what's good. It's not about denying problems. It's about refusing to let problems be the only thing you see. Practice this daily. Before you get out of bed, name 3 specific things you're grateful for. Not generic things like my health, but specific things like the softness of this pillow, the fact that I have clean water to drink, the way the light comes through the window. Specific, sensory, present. This practice literally rewires your attention over time. You start to naturally notice what's working alongside what's challenging, and that balanced attention is much more conducive to both peace and productivity. Let's bring all of this into your actual daily life. You've learned the lessons. Now we need to translate them into practices you can implement starting tomorrow morning. Because wisdom that doesn't change behavior isn't really wisdom. It's just interesting information. First, create a morning routine that sets the tone for regulation rather than reactivity. Marcus would begin each day by preparing his mind before engaging with the world. You can do a simplified version in 10 minutes or less. Before you check your phone, before you engage with any external demands, do this. Sit up in bed or move to a chair. Close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths with extended exhales. Then ask yourself 3 questions. What is one thing I'm grateful for right now? Name something specific and feel the gratitude, don't just think it. What is the most important thing I could do today? Not the most urgent, not the longest task, but the thing that if you did only that one thing, the day would feel meaningful. What is one thing I'm anxious about, and is it something I can influence today? If yes, decide on one small action you can take. If no, practice releasing your grip on it. This 10-minute practice does several things simultaneously. It regulates your nervous system through the breathing. It orients you toward gratitude rather than immediately toward problems. It clarifies priorities so you're not wandering through the day reactively, and it helps you sort your anxieties into those you can address versus those you need to release. This simple practice, done consistently, changes the entire trajectory of your days. Second, implement the 2-minute rule for overcoming procrastination. This is a variation of the micro-commitment idea. If something takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. Don't add it to a list. Don't plan to do it later. Just do it now. This prevents the accumulation of tiny tasks that become an overwhelming mental load, and it trains your brain that action is easier than avoidance. For tasks that take longer than 2 minutes, commit to just 2 minutes of work on them. Tell yourself, I'm going to work on this for exactly 2 minutes and then I can stop. Set a timer. Do the 2 minutes. When the timer goes off, you usually have enough momentum to continue. But if you don't, that's fine. You honored your commitment to 2 minutes. Tomorrow, do another 2 minutes. What you're doing is training your brain that starting is safe, that you don't have to complete everything in one session, that progress can be incremental. Third, create what I call anxiety appointments. This is counterintuitive, but incredibly effective. Instead of trying to suppress anxious thoughts when they arise throughout the day, which usually makes them stronger, schedule a specific time to worry. Literally put it in your calendar, 15 minutes at 5 p.m. every day for worrying. When an anxious thought arises at 10 a.m., acknowledge it and say, "That's interesting. I'll think about that at 5 p.m. during my worry time." And then redirect your attention to the present moment. What happens is remarkable. First, you're not suppressing the anxiety, so you don't get the rebound effect where suppressed thoughts come back stronger. Second, you're practicing the skill of redirecting attention, which gets stronger with practice. Third, when 5 p.m. comes and you sit down for your worry appointment, you often find that many of the things you were anxious about earlier in the day now seem less urgent or important. They lose power when you're not feeding them attention all day. And the anxieties that still feel significant, you give them focused attention for those 15 minutes, problem solve what you can, and then deliberately close the appointment. Fourth, practice the evening review that Marcus did. At the end of each day, spend 5 minutes reflecting on 3 questions. What did I do today that aligned with my values? This isn't about productivity. It's about integrity. Maybe you were kind when you didn't feel like it. Maybe you were honest in a difficult conversation. Maybe you showed up even though you were anxious. Acknowledge that. Where did I give in to anxiety or procrastination today? No judgment, just observation. What triggered it? What was I believing in that moment? This is how you learn your patterns. And most importantly, what will I do differently tomorrow? Choose one specific small change, not a complete overhaul, one tiny adjustment. This practice creates a feedback loop. You're constantly learning about yourself, adjusting your approach and acknowledging your efforts. Over time, you get much better at recognizing your patterns before they fully activate. You start to catch yourself in the early stages of the anxiety-procrastination cycle and redirect before you're fully stuck. Fifth, build your capacity for discomfort gradually through what I call voluntary hardship. This is another Stoic practice that Marcus used regularly. He would deliberately choose discomfort in small ways to train his resilience. He would sleep on hard surfaces sometimes. He would wear simple clothes despite being emperor. He would fast occasionally, not as punishment, but as training. You can do a modern version. Take a cold shower once a week. Not because it's pleasant, but to practice being with intense discomfort without panicking. Sit in meditation for 5 minutes when your mind desperately wants to move. Fast for a meal occasionally. Exercise past the point where it's comfortable. What you're doing is training your nervous system that discomfort is not danger. You're building your capacity to be with what's uncomfortable without immediately seeking escape. This practice has a direct effect on anxiety and procrastination. Both are attempts to avoid discomfort. When you deliberately practice being with chosen discomfort, your automatic avoidance patterns weaken. You prove to yourself repeatedly, I can be uncomfortable and be okay. I can sit with difficult feelings and survive them. This translates directly into being able to face the discomfort of challenging tasks and the discomfort of anxiety without needing to escape into procrastination. Sixth, Create an environment that supports regulation rather than activation. Your environment is constantly influencing your nervous system, usually unconsciously. A cluttered space activates stress. Constant notifications activate vigilance. Poor lighting affects mood. You can't think your way out of an environment that's constantly dysregulating you. Start simple. Before bed, prepare your morning environment. Lay out clothes. Prepare your workspace. Remove obvious distractions. When you wake up, you're walking into an environment that makes regulated action easier rather than harder. Throughout the day, notice what in your environment increases anxiety or decreases motivation. Maybe it's keeping your phone in another room while working. Maybe it's having a plant on your desk. Maybe it's using noise-canceling headphones. Small environmental changes compound over time into significant impacts on your state. Finally, find what Marcus called your inner citadel and return to it regularly. This is a metaphor for a part of yourself that remains calm and clear regardless of external chaos. It's the awareness beneath your thoughts and emotions, the part of you that can observe anxiety without becoming anxiety, the part of you that can notice resistance without being controlled by it. You access this through practices like meditation, but also through any activity that puts you in a state of presence. For some people, it's walking in nature. For others, it's creating art. For others, it's cooking or gardening or playing music. Find the activities that quiet the mental chatter and connect you to simple presence. Do these activities regularly, not as escape, but as practice in returning to your center. When anxiety or laziness arise during your day, you can then have a reference point to return to. You remember, oh yes, there's that place of clarity beneath this chaos. I've been there before. I can find my way back. This isn't about staying in that place constantly, which is unrealistic. It's about knowing it exists and knowing you can return to it. Look at how far we've traveled together. We began in the exhausting trap of anxiety and laziness, that terrible cycle where your mind races and your body freezes. And now you have 7 lessons, 7 keys to unlock the prison you've been living in. But I want to be very honest with you about something. These lessons will not eliminate anxiety and laziness from your life permanently. If that's what you're hoping for, I need to adjust that expectation now, because here's the truth. As long as you're alive and engaged with life, you will feel anxiety sometimes. You will feel resistance sometimes. These are part of being human, not problems to solve forever. What these lessons will do, if you practice them, is completely change your relationship with anxiety and laziness. Anxiety will no longer be this overwhelming force that controls your choices. It will be a sensation that arises, that you recognize that you can be with without being controlled by. Laziness or procrastination will no longer be this shameful character flaw that proves you're broken. It will be information about what you're afraid of, information you can use to address the actual fear. You will still have mornings when you don't want to get out of bed. Marcus had them too. The difference is, you'll know what to do with that feeling. You'll have tools. You'll have practices. You'll have a framework for understanding what's happening and how to work with it rather than against it. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine yourself 6 months from now. You've been practicing these lessons, not perfectly, but consistently. You still feel anxiety, but it doesn't spiral the way it used to. You notice it earlier. You regulate it more quickly. You act despite it more often. You still procrastinate sometimes, but you catch yourself faster. You understand what you're avoiding and why. You take the micro steps more readily. You're not a completely different person. You're a version of yourself that's developed new skills, new awareness, new capacity. The challenges in your life haven't necessarily gotten easier, but you've gotten more capable of meeting them. And that changes everything. This version of you isn't anxious about being anxious. When anxiety arises, you recognize it almost with familiarity. Ah, anxiety, I know you. You're trying to protect me. Thank you for that, but I've got this. This version of you doesn't spiral into shame when procrastinating. Instead, you pause and ask, what am I afraid of here? What do I need to address? And you address it. This version of you has proven to yourself through repeated experience that you can handle discomfort, that you can start things without motivation, that you can take action despite fear, that you're more resilient than you thought. This isn't theoretical anymore. It's lived experience. And lived experience changes you in ways that ideas alone never can. But I also want to acknowledge how hard this journey can be. Changing your relationship with anxiety and laziness means facing the things you've been avoiding, feeling the feelings you've been numbing, questioning the beliefs you've been operating from. It means being willing to be uncomfortable in the short term for freedom in the long term. And that's not easy. There will be days when you want to give up, when the old patterns feel too strong, when the practices feel too hard, when you just want to escape back into distraction and avoidance. On those days, remember Marcus. Remember that he was the most powerful man in the world, and he still struggled with the same things you struggle with. He still had to remind himself of these lessons daily. He still had to practice constantly. And if he had to practice, of course you do too. The practice is not a sign of failure. The practice is the path. There is no destination where you arrive and never have to practice again. The practice becomes your life. And gradually, almost without noticing, the practice becomes less effortful. It becomes more natural. It becomes who you are rather than something you do. You are not broken for feeling anxious. You are not weak for struggling with procrastination. You are human, dealing with a nervous system that was designed for a different world, trying to navigate a complexity that your ancestors never faced. And you're doing it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not as fast as you'd like, but you're doing it. The fact that you're here, that you've stayed with me through this entire journey, that you're willing to learn and change and grow, that tells me something about you. It tells me you have courage. It tells me you have wisdom to recognize that things could be different. It tells me you have strength to keep trying even when it's hard. Marcus Aurelius wrote, near the end of his life, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." I want to adapt that for you. Waste no more time wishing you weren't anxious or lazy. Transform your relationship with these experiences through practice. The 7 lessons are yours now. They're not just information, they're invitations to a different way of being. An invitation to see anxiety as information rather than truth. An invitation to see procrastination as a symptom to understand, rather than a character flaw to condemn. An invitation to practice presence, micro-commitments, nervous system regulation, belief examination, discomfort tolerance, and environmental design. You don't have to practice all of them at once. In fact, please don't. Choose one. Just one practice from everything we've discussed. Maybe it's the morning routine. Maybe it's the 2-minute rule. Maybe it's the extended exhale breathing when anxiety spikes. Choose one and practice it for a week. Just a week. See what happens. See what changes. And then if you want, add another practice. This is how transformation actually happens. Not through dramatic overhauls that you can't sustain, but through small, consistent practices that compound over time into fundamental change. Every time you practice, you're building new neural pathways. You're teaching your nervous system new possibilities. You're proving to yourself that change is real. And here's something powerful to remember. Every moment is a new opportunity to choose differently. You don't have to wait until tomorrow morning. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. Right now, this moment, you can take one breath with extended exhale. You can name one thing you're grateful for. You can take one micro step toward something you've been avoiding. This moment is already different because you're bringing new awareness to it. The anxiety and laziness that have controlled you for so long, they're not stronger than you. They've just been unchallenged. You've believed them, followed them, let them guide your choices. But now you have tools. Now you have understanding. Now you have practices. And practice by practice, moment by moment, choice by choice, you reclaim your life. Marcus never got to see the impact his private writings would have on millions of people across thousands of years. But you get to see the impact of these practices on your life starting right now. That's your advantage. You don't have to wait for history to judge whether this was worthwhile. You can experience the worth directly, immediately, personally. Go forward with courage. Face the anxiety with breath and presence. Face the procrastination with curiosity and micro steps. Build your capacity for discomfort gradually. Create environments that support you. Examine and update beliefs that no longer serve you. And above all, be patient with yourself. You're unlearning patterns that have been years in the making. That takes time. That takes practice. That takes compassion. You are not your anxiety. You are not your procrastination. You are the awareness that can observe these patterns, understand them, and choose something different. You are capable of more than you know. You are stronger than you feel. And you are exactly where you need to be to begin. The life you want, the peace you seek, the productivity you desire, they're not in some distant future when you finally have it all together. They're available right now in this present moment through the choice to practice. Everything you need is already within you. These lessons just help you remember it. Go. Practice. Transform. And know that each time you do, you're proving something profound. That you are not a victim of your mind, but the master of your choices. The journey begins now.